Good morning. Thanks everyone so much for joining me for Coffee Conversation. So this morning is Tiffany Hanson. I am so excited. I feel like I say that all the time, but I think we're finding that I really love women in my circle and in this community, and I'm always inspired. So Tiffany Hanson and I met each other when I worked with Open for Service, and we kind of just stayed in touch because she does everything. So I'm going to read it. This happens, every time, but she is outreach and engagement for Luna Language Services. She is director of marketing and communications for Indie Pride. She is on the editorial board for Indie Maven. She is on the IPS Foundation board, the Indiana Latin Expo board, the Diversity Roundtable of Central Indiana board, all the things. And this is why I really wanted to talk to you, because you are so broad in your scope of whether it's work or volunteer, but also really, really intentional. So I'm so excited. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being excited.
I'm so excited. Okay, so that's a lot, right? So what do you do? Like what's your normal day, obviously?
Yeah, so at the core of most of the work that I do, I'm a marketing and communications professional with experience in public relations and event planning. So still lots of hats. Like
Yeah.
I typically either work for or volunteer with organizations that are somewhat small and end up taking on kind of multiple roles to kind of get stuff done.
Yeah.
So my full-time job is as an outreach and engagement manager for Luna Language Services, which is a language service company, which means we provide like translation work or interpretation work. And a lot of the role that I play is education in the community about language access, making
Okay.
sure that immigrants and refugees and the deaf and hard of hearing population have access to all the same resources and opportunities that people in other population groups do. So I end up being able to work with some really incredible people in the community that support those communities. And then my piece is really pushing to make sure that language access is
Right.
everywhere, essentially.
So good.
So that's my full-time role.
Well, now I want to talk about how'd you get to all the others? Because again, really with that intentionality is why I'm really excited to talk to you. And, granted, you just said you have access to lots of really great organizations and people. What made you decide? How did you get all in on things like the IPS Foundation Board, to Latin Expo, to Diversity Roundtable, Indie Pride?
Yeah. So where my whole journey started with all of this was actually several years ago. And this was probably about the time that you and I met.
Yeah.
Was I was working for a small law firm, and they had a couple of lawyers who each had a couple of different practice areas, and one of them was employment law. And so what I started doing was advocating for essentially anti-discrimination policies, or just teaching people this is what it looks like when someone's just being a jerk. This is what it looks like when discrimination becomes unlawful and you can do something about it. So through that education, I ended up meeting all these really wonderful people, whether that's when I joined the board of Indie Pride. That's when I started doing work with the deaf population. That's how I actually met the folks at Luna and built
Yeah.
a relationship with them. I learned more about immigration law. It was all of these, because people who typically have employment law challenges typically have a lot of other legal challenges as well, just by the nature of the way the system works.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of opened my mind to the fact that there are a lot of people in our community that don't enjoy the same types of security that I do.
Yep.
We call that privilege, right? But
Yep.
just kind of reframing it just a little bit differently. And I just kind of became infatuated with trying to do what I could with especially my time and talents, and connecting the dots in different ways and things like that. So the line of intentionality that you're talking about is really just jumping into organizations where I think there's an opportunity for me to create more equity in the community, and then just seeing what I can do.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So this is a lot, a lot of boards, a lot of work. So where have you found over the past, year, where has been some of that struggle?
Yeah, I think that my life went from, like, I've always basically worked from home and been out and stuff,
Okay.
but my life went from being at nonprofit fundraisers and at meetings and like around people all the time to when the pandemic hit, like, it's just me and my laptop. Like, I love my laptop, but like, I don't have any kids at home or a significant other or even any pets. And so it just was this like, how can I connect with people?
Yeah.
And so a challenge for me, which I'm a silver linings person, so it also became an opportunity, was to figure out how to make better connections with people in the community, or like virtually,
Right.
or just how to pivot different programs. Last year was really tough for Indie Pride. We were literally ready to launch all of our marketing for our big festival the week that like basically all of the shutdown
Yeah.
orders started in March. And so then it was like hurry up and wait, and then it was like there's a lot of uncertainty what's going to happen, and we had to pivot our plans a solid like 4 times, and ended up pulling off this really great virtual festival and some other really great virtual events as well. But when you have so much uncertainty and you're just like, I don't know what to do. This past year has been a big challenge for me to be more flexible and figure out how to pivot better, and to just like roll with it. Because what are you gonna do? You can't
What are you going to
control
do? Right. So let's pivot on that, right? So where have you found the opposite? Where is some of that joy, some of that delight come from?
Yeah, I think it comes from when those things become successful,
Yeah.
right? So one of the roles that I take on is I sit on the board at the Diversity Roundtable of Central Indiana. And that organization, we provide diversity and inclusion training once a month, and then we have an annual conference in October. I am the professional development director, which means I curate all those speakers, I schedule everything, and I'm also doing a lot to help with the marketing. And all of those events were in person prior to March of last year.
Right.
Um, we found that as we pivoted to virtual meetings, there was some pushback from board members that had been there a long time. And they're like, but this
Right.
is how we do it, right? Seeing them grow and change and understand how we can pivot to something that's virtual. And then seeing that become really successful. Our meeting attendance, because those meetings are typically on one Wednesday every month, and they're kind of early in the morning.
Yep.
And so we would typically get about 30 to 35 people that would attend in person. But now that it's over Zoom and people can like watch with their coffee in their sweatpants,
Yep.
our attendance is typically right around 100 every single month. I know it's
That's
crazy.
amazing.
It's crazy. And it's allowed us to even expand we did a virtual conference last year. But even things like we had a major hospital network that signed on with a corporate or a corporate membership with Diversity
Mhm.
Roundtable, because they had leadership across the country and they wanted them all to access the same DEI training. And so they're
Right.
essentially using us for their training for some of their leaders. That would have never been able to
Right.
happen if we were in person. So, like I said, I'm like a silver linings Pollyanna type. And so I love it when you see something like that work out and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
like maybe that's what we'll continue to do moving forward. Or,
Yeah. That broader reach.
yeah.
Oh, that's so good. So I want to talk a little bit about how, because I'm sure there are a lot of people that are watching or listening that just don't know how to get engaged, right? That don't know, and I'm not just saying a board seat, because as a board member myself, like it does take time to just get a board seat sometimes, depending on the organization. But how can people show up or show out or even find something that they are interested, that they want to give that time? Again, I don't leave my house ever. I feel like, especially now that it's like 2 degrees outside.
I know.
Um, and granted that, Zoom fatigue is a thing, but, how can people, especially right now, get engaged to things? How would you give some of your advice?
Yeah, and because I volunteer with like everyone in the city, I regularly have professionals that ask me that, and sometimes I'll do like a little sit down session with them. And the first thing is to actually that I do with people is like really explore what's important to you, because one of the worst things you can do is volunteer for something and then like kind of half-ass it, or just like you're just not really there, or you kind
Yeah.
of get bored with it after a couple months or something, right?
Yeah.
Like Lord knows I've sat on boards where half of the board is really engaged and the other half of the board is just there because they're doing a thing, right?
Yeah.
So I really try to help people explore like what's really important to you. What are some issues that are really important to you, like in the core of your being? And then, okay, so now let's try and look at some nonprofits that align with that mission.
Yeah.
And that typically ends up being even nonprofits in several different spaces. And so like that, I think is the first step, is to really internally think about that.
Yeah.
um, and then the next step is to just reach out to the leaders of those organizations and just say, almost all these organizations have a way to contact them to ask for volunteer help, or even just emailing the info at email sometimes and just saying, hey, I'd really love to get more involved. I'd really love to learn how to support you. What can I do? And have a conversation with somebody and just see what they say. I mean, every organization is different,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of organizations now, like Indie Pride does not need a ton of in-person volunteers for
Right.
something right now. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking for people to share their story for a storytelling series, or, there's all sorts of little
Yeah.
ways that you can try to get involved. So it's, like I said, finding out what is really important to you, seeking out some organizations, and then making contact and asking, what's the best way for me to get involved?
I love that. So when you started choosing yours, obviously your core, what was it about? And we might have covered this a bit, but just a little clarifying. What was it about Indie Pride, even an editorial for Indie Maven, obviously stories, IPS Foundations, you don't have kids. Latin Expo, you're a white woman, Diversity Roundtable, like what about these? I just wanted to dive deeper, really talking about that core for you. So what was that core for you that made you say, this is where I'm going to go? Because there's not, IPS School Foundation could be very different from Diversity Roundtable, from Indie Pride. In theory, they're all connected, but for you, what was that core value?
Yeah, I think part of it was kind of spreading it around a little bit, right? And being able to get engaged in several different communities in a number of ways. But quite frankly, a lot of those roles also just came out of personal connections.
Yeah.
So with the IPS Foundation Board, I was actually voluntold that I was going to be on that board. A woman who actually passed away in the past couple of years. Her name was Pam Gemmer, and Pam was like, she was kind of a mentor to me, and she was just this retired school teacher that was so excited about Mexican culture. She helped to build like a sister city for students at IPS and I mean, all sorts of really wonderful things. And Pam was she was just really instrumental in
Yeah.
introducing me to a lot of different people in the community. And she told me one day, she's like, I really think you should think about joining the IPS Foundation Board. And I was like, okay, well, like, send me some more information. And she sent me a little bit of info, and then that was it. And then all of a sudden I saw her at another nonprofit event. She's like, by the way, we voted you on our board last night. And I said, you did? I didn't even apply. And she goes, oh, don't worry, I took care of it. And I was like, Pam. And it just happened. And I've
you
been on
know,
the board for 3 years, and it's been wonderful.
oh my gosh, I love that. I have always said, so I am an expat. I am not from here. And I came here knowing nobody, right? I just moved to Indiana out of college, and that's a whole nother story that probably needs alcohol, but I got here and didn't know anyone. And so, and professionally, I was in a job that traveled. So I wasn't here very much. So I wasn't really finding roots. And I met someone who said, well, let's volunteer somewhere. And that kind of just started on my journey. And I think that was at Indian Humane Society, maybe. And then, that rolled to something else and something else. And I say that as that's how I found my roots in this city, is through nonprofit. That is how I have gotten into almost every job professionally that I've had, is from a contact that I had in a nonprofit. Because it's true, people can vouch for you when they know your truth, when you show up when you're not getting paid and you're still giving it your all, right? So that's your core, and that will translate hopefully into the workplace. But volunteering in Indy, and I hope more people do it, is how I put down roots here, however many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I guess, now. But it's just so important. And I really think that, I just really think that the more people have an idea, and even something as simple as reach out to an organization's info, I would be like, I don't know, maybe I know someone, I can introduce you. But just going
Right.
directly to an info page, especially during this, is such a simple aha, right? Like I wouldn't even think to just do that, because I think you do get so immersed in the, well, who do I know? And can someone give me an introduction, that we kind of just don't go right after what we want. So
Yeah.
anyway, long spiel of how absolutely fantastic I think nonprofit work is in the city. And I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and guiding people and mentoring people in that way. So how can the community, that you are outreaching, that you are doing so much work for, how can that community show up? And that could be to something right now that's tugging at your heart. That could be for you. That could be, how can they show up, in any way that, that Tiffany Hanson needs?
I think it's just finding places to get plugged in and be engaged. I think because we are in a situation, especially right now, where engagement for like everything is really low, right?
Yeah.
Because we are zoomed out, because we are just like, I don't know, where I feel like there's just so many people that are in a funk because of the
Yeah.
pandemic, because of the winter time, all
Oh,
these.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's mental health is a big challenge right now for a lot of people because of the amount of change that we're all
Mhm.
experiencing every single day.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it's finding something and just like very intentionally participating, whether that is this year Exodus Refugee Immigration did a gala at home. So they did like an online event, but they found a really incredible way where if you donated, it was a free event for people to watch. Let me just say
Yeah.
that. But if you donated $100 before the event happened to go towards this fundraiser, then they sent you this bag that had ingredients for a Burmese salad, and it had an Exodus t-shirt. It had like some little swag items in it. And then they also had, my favorite thing was, you had access to this playlist on Spotify that their team had curated of some of their favorite songs from around the globe.
Yeah.
I was like, to the end of my days, I'll be like, that is the best little like at home fundraiser package I've ever seen. But it was so great, like, taking something that could be as normal,
Yeah.
or ordinary is a better way to
Yeah.
put it at this point, as like a Zoom thing online, and turning it into, let me get into your home, and just really embracing that. And
Yeah.
I think that like participation is the best thing that people can do. It's a really long way for me to say, just like give it a shot and get
Yeah.
excited about something and contribute to the ambiance of something that someone's trying to create, and find ways to share that with other people. Like, we're all trying to find ways to connect in meaningful ways with one
Yeah.
another. So be an active part of that. And it can help not only you, obviously, with mental health or just social things that you're trying to accomplish, but the people around you and these organizations.
I love that. I mean, I do really think having that outside focus, right, pulls us a little bit out of that funk. I also love that you referenced Indiana refugee, because my 6-year-old picked out his Refugees Welcome Here shirt today. So he's wearing
Yeah.
that today. I love that. So, okay, so let's wrap it up a bit. Obviously, being really considerate of your time, but the most important question, this is my favorite question. How do you want to leave your trace, right? At the end of that road, that legacy left, what do you want that to say?
Yeah, I think that it is just about helping other people. Like, I would love to be known, like that's the legacy I want to leave
Yeah.
behind, is that we should be compassionate of other people and we should help out wherever we can. And that's what I strive to do, and lead by example. And if it's just that simple of just trying to leave that legacy of help and support and empathy, and um,
Yeah.
all of those feelings kind of go along with all of the work that I engage in. And so that I would love to for that to be my legacy.
I love that. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm grateful for the time that you give our community to make our community better, that you lift up other people, marginalized communities, that You're just a good human being, Tiffany. I'm just really grateful for you. So thank you so much for having coffee with me. Thank you for sharing your story, giving great tips and great advice, and sharing your legacy with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.